Have you ever walked out of an IMAX theater feeling like you didn't just watch a movie, but actually lived through it? Maybe it was a massive explosion that made your seat vibrate, or a breathtaking shot of a mountain that felt so real you almost believed you could step into it. Whatever the reason, IMAX movies have a strange ability to make everything feel larger than life. Most people think that's simply because the screen is bigger or the speakers are louder, but that's only the final piece of the puzzle. The truth is that an IMAX movie starts becoming IMAX months, and sometimes even years before it ever reaches a theater. Every stage of the filmmaking process is different, from the way scenes are planned to the cameras they use, the editing process, the sound design, and even the projectors that finally display the movie. By the end of this video, you'll realize that IMAX isn't just a different way to watch a movie, it's almost an entirely different way of making one. Everything begins with a decision made long before filming starts. Directors don't simply wake up one day and decide they'll release their movie in IMAX. They have to design the movie around it. That's because IMAX cameras have always been very different from ordinary cinema cameras. In the early days of filmmaking, most Hollywood movies were shot on 35mm film. This film was reliable, relatively affordable, and small enough for cameras to be portable. But IMAX wanted something far more ambitious. Instead of using the traditional film format, engineers created a system that used gigantic 70mm film running sideways through the camera. This may not sound like a huge difference, but it completely changed the amount of information each frame could capture. Imagine taking a small photo and stretching it across the side of a building. It would quickly become blurry because there simply aren't enough details in the image. Now imagine taking a photograph with 10 times more information. Suddenly, stretching it across a giant screen becomes possible without losing clarity. That's exactly what IMAX achieved. Every single frame captured an incredible amount of detail, allowing audiences to see textures, reflections, and tiny objects that would normally disappear on a regular cinema screen. Of course, this incredible quality came with an equally incredible problem. The cameras were enormous. Some early IMAX cameras weighed well over 100 kilograms once fully loaded with film and accessories. They weren't the kind of cameras you could casually carry through a forest or run alongside actors with. They often required multiple crew members just to move them into position. Even after all that effort, they produced another unexpected challenge. They were incredibly loud. Every second the film rolled through the camera, dozens of mechanical parts were moving at high speed, creating a constant rattling sound. If actors were speaking during the scene, that noise could easily ruin the recorded dialogue. As a result, many scenes had to be dubbed later in a recording studio using a process known as ADR, where actors re-recorded every line while perfectly matching their lip movements on screen. It sounds simple, but getting emotions, timing, and breathing to match perfectly can take hours for just a few minutes of footage. Then there was the issue of film itself. Unlike digital cameras that can record for hours using memory cards, traditional IMAX cameras relied on massive rolls of film that disappeared surprisingly quickly. Depending on the camera and shooting speed, a full film magazine could last only around 2 or 3 minutes before needing to be replaced. Imagine filming an intense action sequence involving explosions, dozens of actors, expensive stunts, and helicopters flying overhead, only to stop everything every couple of minutes because the camera ran out of film. Every interruption cost time, money, and patience. Reloading wasn't as simple as swapping a battery either. The exposed film had to be removed carefully in complete darkness to avoid ruining it, while a fresh roll had to be threaded perfectly through the camera's mechanical system. One small mistake could destroy thousands of dollars worth of footage. This was one of the biggest reasons why very few directors chose to shoot an entire movie using IMAX film cameras. Even Christopher Nolan, one of IMAX's biggest supporters, faced these limitations. When filming movies like The Dark Knight, Dunkirk, Tenet, and Oppenheimer, his crew had to carefully decide which scenes truly deserved the IMAX treatment. Fast-paced conversations inside a small room usually didn't need it, but giant landscapes, emotional close-ups, breathtaking action scenes, and massive practical explosions were worth the effort because audiences would experience those moments on a completely different scale. Nolan often planned entire sequences around the capabilities and limitations of the IMAX cameras, sometimes redesigning scenes simply because the equipment couldn't physically fit into certain locations. In some cases, doors had to be removed, walls temporarily dismantled, or custom rigs built just to place the camera exactly where it needed to be. Filmmaking had to adapt to the camera instead of the other way around, which is the complete opposite of how most movies are made today. The challenges didn't stop once filming actually began. Because every frame captured such enormous detail, even tiny mistakes suddenly became visible. A wrinkle in an actor's costume, fingerprints on a prop, makeup imperfections, or a small reflection from a hidden crew member could all appear clearly once projected onto a gigantic IMAX screen. Departments responsible for costumes, makeup, lighting, and production design suddenly had much higher standards because audiences would notice details that ordinary movie screens might completely hide. Even visual effects artists had to create far more detailed digital environments since low-resolution textures or shortcuts would immediately stand out. In many ways, IMAX didn't just demand better cameras. It demanded better filmmaking from every single department involved in the production. As technology improved, filmmakers began asking an obvious question: what if they could keep the incredible image quality of IMAX without carrying cameras that weighed more than some motorcycles? That question led to the development of IMAX-certified digital cameras. These modern cameras are dramatically smaller, quieter, and easier to use, yet they still capture an enormous amount of detail. They also allow filmmakers to shoot for much longer without stopping every few minutes to reload film. This changed everything. Suddenly, directors could use IMAX cameras in places that would have been impossible just a decade earlier. They could mount them on helicopters, race cars, drones, cranes, or handheld stabilizers, allowing audiences to experience scenes that previously couldn't have been filmed in the IMAX format. Even though many directors still love the unique look of traditional IMAX film, digital cameras made the format practical for far more productions. You may have noticed something strange while watching certain blockbuster movies in an IMAX theater. During some scenes there are black bars at the top and bottom of the screen, but suddenly they disappear and the picture becomes much taller. It almost feels as if the screen itself has expanded. In reality, the screen hasn't changed at all. What changes is the amount of the image you're being shown. Most movies are filmed in a widescreen aspect ratio where the image is much wider than it is tall. IMAX cameras, however, can capture a much taller frame. Instead of cropping away the top and bottom of the picture, IMAX theaters display much more of what the camera originally recorded. That means you aren't zooming in, you're actually seeing extra information that audiences in standard theaters never get to see. Directors often save this expanded aspect ratio for the most emotional or visually spectacular moments, because it instantly makes the audience feel more immersed. But capturing beautiful footage is only the beginning. Once filming wraps, hundreds or even thousands of hours of raw footage are transferred to editing teams. Editors don't simply place scenes one after another. They carefully build the rhythm of the movie, deciding exactly how long every shot should stay on screen. A shot that lasts 1 second instead of 2 can completely change how tense or emotional a scene feels. Every cut, every transition, and every camera angle is selected to guide the audience's attention without them even realizing it. After the first rough version of the movie is complete, another process begins that most moviegoers have never even heard of: IMAX digital media remastering, commonly called DMR. This is one of IMAX's biggest secrets, and one of the main reasons an IMAX movie often looks noticeably better than the exact same film shown in a standard theater. During DMR, the movie is analyzed frame by frame using specialized software and human experts. Noise created by camera sensors is reduced without removing important details. Colors are adjusted so they remain accurate even on gigantic laser screens. Contrast is carefully balanced to preserve details in both bright highlights and dark shadows. Sharpness is improved without making the image look artificial. Visual effects are checked to ensure they blend seamlessly with real footage. Every single frame receives attention because even a tiny flaw that might go unnoticed on a regular screen could become obvious when projected several stories tall. The sound then receives the same level of attention. Many people assume IMAX theaters simply use louder speakers, but volume has very little to do with why they sound so different. Imagine listening to an orchestra where every instrument is playing at maximum volume. It would sound messy and exhausting. Great audio is about balance, not loudness. Sound designers spend months separating dialogue, music, background ambience, footsteps, explosions, vehicles, wind, rain, and hundreds of other individual sound elements into separate layers. They carefully position each sound within three-dimensional space so your brain naturally believes it's coming from the correct direction. If a helicopter flies from behind the camera toward the screen, the sound moves with it. If someone whispers quietly while an explosion happens in the distance, you can still hear every word they say. That clarity is achieved through countless hours of mixing rather than simply turning up the volume. Only after months or sometimes years of planning, filming, editing, visual effects, color grading, remastering, and sound mixing is the movie finally ready for theaters. Even then, the experience depends on equipment that most audiences never notice. IMAX laser projectors are precisely calibrated to maintain consistent brightness, accurate colors, and razor-sharp focus across the entire screen. Unlike ordinary projectors that can gradually drift out of calibration, IMAX systems are checked regularly to ensure every showing matches the filmmaker's intentions. The screen itself is engineered to reflect light evenly so viewers sitting on the sides don't see a dimmer picture. The seating layout is carefully designed to maximize viewing angles, while the speaker placement ensures audio reaches every seat with remarkable consistency. In other words, the theater isn't just a room with a giant screen, it's part of the filmmaking process itself. Perhaps the most surprising fact is that even today, making an IMAX movie is still more expensive, more demanding, and far more complicated than producing a standard film. Every department has to work harder because the camera captures so much detail that tiny mistakes become impossible to hide. Makeup artists spend longer perfecting skin tones, costume designers inspect every stitch of clothing, set designers fill environments with realistic details, cinematographers obsess over lighting, and visual effects artists create assets at incredibly high resolutions. Everyone knows that once the movie reaches an IMAX screen, millions of viewers will be able to notice things that would disappear entirely in a normal theater. That's why only a small percentage of films receive the full IMAX treatment. It's not because studios don't want to do it, it's because very few productions are willing to commit the extra time, money, and effort required. So the next time you buy a ticket for an IMAX movie, remember that you're not simply paying for a larger screen or louder speakers. You're experiencing the result of thousands of creative decisions that began years before the opening night. Every giant landscape, every breathtaking close-up, every earth-shaking explosion, every perfectly balanced sound effect, and every crystal-clear frame exists because hundreds of people spent countless hours pushing technology to its limits in pursuit of a single goal, making you forget you're sitting in a theater at all. And maybe that's the real magic of IMAX. It's not about making movies look bigger. It's about making the distance between you and the story disappear, until for just a couple of hours it feels like you aren't watching the movie anymore, you've become part of it.